This is Hannibal here from the Hannibal TV on YouTube with a huge wrestling news update. The Rock appeared on WWE SmackDown tonight. The purpose of his appearance was to announce WrestleMania next year is going to be in New Orleans, Louisiana. The Rock also did a press conference after his SmackDown appearance, which I would say it didn't really show who the reporters were. It was definitely a worked press conference because nobody asked him if he was going to wrestle on WrestleMania, and the questions were nothing really of any substance. So we didn't get anything. Are you going to wrestle on this year's WrestleMania? You're going to wrestle on next year's WrestleMania? He plugged his tequila. He did say that they wanted to make the announcement at the Super Bowl, but due to some reasons beyond their control, they couldn't. Of course, the Super Bowl was in New Orleans. He also talked quite a bit about Master P, former WCW wrestler Master P, who had the No Limit Soldiers in WCW. There was a lot of talk in this about rap for whatever reason. There wasn't much substance to that press conference. I'll be perfectly honest with you. He he told the story that he's already told before, and I do like The Rock, where he alleged that at one point in time when he was getting booed, he was going to quit to go into MMA. And I've heard Dave Meltzer say this before. It doesn't necessarily line up well with the timelines where when he was saying he was going to quit around the time of his match with the Sultan at WrestleMania 13. It was before there was big money in MMA at huge levels. So who knows? Maybe he just said it to plug his upcoming movie with Mark Kerr, The Smashing Machine. Mark Kerr, who I've interviewed a bunch of times. But overall, I mean, I watched his announcement. It's always nice to see The Rock in the ring. But I'd like to. It seems like in wrestling these days, it's always It's always just an announcement or a promo. There's nothing like. There's no angle. Like there's nothing really other than an announcement. So there we go. We got an announcement. Nice to see The Rock. I'll say that. But I mean, there's nothing about it that makes me want to see this year's WrestleMania or next year's WrestleMania, to be honest. Apparently, Goldberg, his retirement match is likely going to be at SummerSlam and not at WrestleMania. It's likely going to be against Gunther, who will probably drop the title to Jey Uso at WrestleMania. Not a lot of must see matches at WrestleMania so far this year. Everyone assumes the feature match is going to be Cody Rhodes against John Cena. As far as the new SmackDown co-head writer, Brian James, the Road Dogg, Jesse James, 55, is now the co-lead writer of SmackDown. He also had that exact same position as co-lead writer of SmackDown from 2016 to 2019. Apparently, the Shane McMahon meeting with Tony Khan over the summer in Arlington, Texas, according to Jonathan Coachman, was that Tony Khan wanted to get some share in AEW and run AEW, which apparently Tony Khan ghosted him after that. According to Dave Meltzer, I mean, Tony Khan is pretty much hands on with everything at AEW. He is the head booker and the final booker. Guys like QT Marshall, Dax Harwood, and Brian Danielson have input, and people like Mercedes Moné, John Moxley, and Jericho have a lot of say in what they do in their matches. But the thought that Tony Khan would hand over the reins of AEW to Shane McMahon, although Shane, it would, in my opinion, undoubtedly do a much better job It just is not going to happen. The whole point of AEW is it's Tony Khan's toy. It's his little toy that his dad, a multi-billionaire, got him. SmackDown Valentine's Day in Washington last week, 12,789 fans, very good crowd. Raw, Charlotte, this Monday, February 17th, 14,000. Very good crowd. Apparently for the Evolve tapings, this new WWE Evolve show, which is going to be, they've got many levels of development right now. They have NXT, which is kind of their highest level of development. They have TNA, which is doing a lot of crossover with WWE. Apparently, even the Hardys are going to be appearing in WWE soon. They're under TNA contract, but there's a huge crossover. We've seen Moose appear on WWE programming. I mean, there's a very close working relationship there, and I think TNA's at one of its better points in this relationship. It looks like probably, if I was a betting man, WWE is eventually just going to absorb the whole company. But the whole NXT TNA thing, I think, has been very good. As far as AEW's relationship with CMLL, again, Collision is pretty much a show that has very little interest these days, but they're sending Takashita and Taya Valkyrie to CMLL. Again, these are two. I mean, these are two wrestlers that rarely wrestle on Collision, and apparently they're two of the more popular AEW wrestlers. At least Takashita is AEW. Taya Valkyrie used to be in WWE for a bit. I mean, she had a buzz, but it just seems to me they keep sending their people to other companies rather than focusing on their own stuff, which is fine. It's their choice, but it doesn't bring much interest to me. Like Mercedes Moné is doing more indies now, yet she's not on every AEW taping. They're bringing in CMLL star Mystico back to AEW next month. Again, and I got no, he's very over, this Mystico guy, with Mexican fans, but it's weird that AEW has so many wrestlers they hardly use, and it's like, oh, let's bring in an outside wrestler, and let's just keep paying these guys for doing nothing, that are already under contract. Here's an interesting point that Dave Meltzer brought up in his Wrestling Observer. By the way, Thunder Rosa apparently had an absolutely disastrous segment on Dynamite this week, which I've tried finding it on the internet. If anyone has the link to this Thunder Rosa Dynamite segment, put it in the comments and I'll do a review of it. Apparently, it was horrible. But Dave Meltzer brings up that there is apparently an issue, first of all, with WWE talent that loses all the time, like guys like Miro not wanting to do jobs in AEW for whatever reason. A lot of these wrestlers that didn't win a lot in WWE go to AEW and then they refuse to do jobs because I guess Tony Khan's more lenient about forcing people to do jobs, but then he'll just not use them rather than try and make them do jobs. Also, there's a lot of older wrestlers in AEW right now, like Lashley, MVP, Shelton Benjamin, Adam Copeland. And Meltzer brings up that these guys, although they're getting cheer, I mean, Christian's another one of them, they get a reaction in the arena. They haven't moved any numbers in a positive direction as far as ratings or attendance, yet they still keep hiring more of these guys for whatever reason. Apparently, they've lost a ton of their 18 to 34-year-old viewers. And I mean, as much as I like all those guys that were just mentioned, there's a good point. Keeping on hiring these guys that are in their late 40s and 50s, it's not going to bring back those younger viewers. Even Ricochet, Meltzer mentions, is 36. Josh Alexander, another person apparently they're just hired in AEW from TNA, he's 37. And Meltzer, and I like Josh Alexander as a person. I can't say I'm a fan of his wrestling. He's very plain and generic, but as a person, he's a nice guy. But Meltzer, who's a fan of his style of wrestling, brings up that Josh Alexander is 37 and they have a lot of guys of Josh Alexander's style. And Meltzer brings this up. He says, "Why bring in another older mid card guy? It's like he's not going to make any difference. It's just another person you have to pay." Yeah, Richard. I mean, I'm sick of these announcements. To be honest, it's just there's nothing that it's not the same wrestling that I liked in the 80s and the 90s and was obsessed with and made me fall in love with it. The news is still interesting to follow, and I'll always follow the news and I'll watch the highlights of stuff like The Rock, what he did. But again, it's an announcement, and I saw him on Netflix doing another announcement. It's like at some point in time, I've seen enough of these announcements.